The restaurant fell silent as Elise Harrington stood up from her table, tears streaming down her face. What she had just witnessed changed everything, not just for the struggling single father across the room, but for her own son who watched in awe as his mother made a decision that would ripple through countless lives. If you've ever wondered whether one moment of genuine compassion can transform multiple destinies, this story will show you how profoundly it can. Like, subscribe, and join us on this journey of unexpected kindness that reminds us what truly matters in life. Michael fidgeted with his silverware, avoiding his mother's gaze across the white tablecloth. The chandelier light caught on the diamond bracelet adorning Elise Harrington's wrist as she reached for her water glass. At 42, Elise commanded attention wherever she went, not just because she was the CEO of Harrington Technologies with a net worth of $3.2 billion, but because of the quiet intensity that radiated from her. Tonight, however, that intensity was directed at her 16-year-old son, who had been suspended from his prestigious private school for the third time this semester. "I don't understand why we need to have this conversation in public," Michael muttered, his eyes darting around Lucille, Boston's most exclusive restaurant where reservations were booked months in advance, unless you were Elise Harrington. "Because at home, you walk away." "Here, you'll listen," Elise replied, her voice soft but firm. The waiter approached with practiced deference, pouring wine into her glass without being asked. "Thank you, James." Michael slumped further into his chair. He knew the routine. His mother would lecture him about responsibility, about the Harrington legacy, about how his behavior reflected on the family name. The same speech he'd heard after he'd been caught skipping classes to hang out at the mall, after he'd cheated on his calculus exam, and now after he'd been discovered drinking on school grounds. "Do you know what I was doing at your age?" Elise began, but something caught her attention over Michael's shoulder. Her perfectly composed expression faltered. Michael turned to follow her gaze. 3 tables away sat a man in his 30s wearing a clean but visibly worn button-up shirt. Across from him was a girl about 10 years old in a simple dress that was slightly too small for her. The man was studying the menu with obvious anxiety, whispering something to his daughter who nodded solemnly. "What?" Michael asked, turning back to his mother. Elise shook her head slightly. "Nothing. As I was saying." But her attention kept drifting to the father and daughter. When the waiter approached their table, the man ordered only one entree and a side salad. The little girl didn't protest, though her eyes lingered on the plates of food being carried to other tables. "Mom?" Michael prompted, surprised by his mother's uncharacteristic distraction. "I'm sorry," Elise said, refocusing. "Michael, I'm worried about you. This path you're on." She stopped again as she watched the father discreetly ask the waiter for a glass of water with lemon for himself and a small soda for his daughter. The waiter's smile tightened, but he nodded and walked away. "That man," Elise said quietly, "reminds me of someone." Michael rolled his eyes. "Can we just get this over with? Ground me, take away my phone, whatever." Elise didn't respond. Her mind had traveled 25 years into the past, to another restaurant, not nearly as fancy as Lucille, where a young single mother had sat across from her 7-year-old daughter, calculating if she could afford to order anything more than soup for herself so her daughter could have the pasta she wanted. "Mom worked 3 jobs back then," Elise said suddenly, startling Michael with this unexpected detour. "After Dad left, there was no child support, no alimony. Just Mom, me, and mountains of bills." Michael shifted uncomfortably. His grandmother had passed away 5 years ago, but she had lived her final years in luxury, in a beautiful home Elise had bought for her. He'd never connected those comfortable memories with the struggling woman his mother was describing. "One night, Mom took me out to dinner to celebrate getting a promotion at her main job," Elise continued, her eyes still on the father and daughter. "It was nothing special, just a family restaurant, but for us, it was a big deal. Mom ordered just a cup of soup for herself, saying she wasn't hungry. I believed her then. I understand now." The waiter returned to the father's table with their drinks and a basket of bread. The girl reached eagerly for a piece, but stopped, looking at her father for permission. He nodded with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. A woman at the next table noticed, Elise said. She paid our bill anonymously and left a note saying my mother's dedication inspired her. Mom cried that night. I didn't understand why then. Michael had never seen this side of his mother, this vulnerability, this connection to a past so different from the wealth and privilege that had always surrounded him. What happened to that woman? He asked. I don't know, Elise replied. But I've never forgotten what she did. How it made us feel seen when we were trying so hard to be invisible in our struggle. The waiter arrived at their table with appetizers neither of them had touched. Elise looked up at him. James, the gentleman with the young daughter, table 14, what did they order? James hesitated, his professional demeanor momentarily slipping. Just the roast chicken to share, Ms. Harrington, and a side salad. Elise nodded. Please cancel our order. Michael's eyes widened. We're leaving. No, Elise said, reaching for her purse. She pulled out her black card and handed it to James. I'd like to pay for everything on table 14's bill. And please tell the chef I'd like him to prepare a special dinner for them, the works, appetizers through dessert. Whatever his daughter might like. And a good bottle of wine for him. James smiled. Of course, Ms. Harrington. But anonymously, Elise added. Don't tell them who it's from. As James walked away, Michael stared at his mother. Why are you doing this? Because I can, Elise said simply. And because 25 years ago, someone did it for me and my mother when we needed it most. Michael watched as moments later, the waiter approached the father's table and leaned down to speak quietly. The man's expression transformed from confusion to disbelief to overwhelming emotion. The little girl clapped her hands in excitement as the waiter explained they could order anything they wanted. Who is he? Michael asked, genuinely curious now. I don't know, Elise admitted. But I recognize that look. The one that says you're doing mental math with every item on the menu, calculating what you can afford while still making rent this month. For the first time that evening, Michael really looked at the man and his daughter. He noticed how the father's shoes were polished but the soles were worn thin. How his daughter's hair was neatly braided but her dress had been mended at the shoulder. How despite their obvious financial constraints, there was unmistakable love in the way the father leaned forward to listen to his daughter's suddenly animated chatter about the menu. I've never had to think about money like that, Michael said quietly. No, you haven't, Elise agreed. That's not your fault. It's a privilege I worked hard to give you. But privilege comes with responsibility, Michael. As they watched, the first course arrived at the father and daughter's table, a beautiful plate of appetizers that made the girl's eyes widen with delight. The father looked around the restaurant, perhaps wondering about their anonymous benefactor, before turning back to his daughter with a smile that transformed his tired face. I want to do more, Elise said suddenly. More than buying them dinner? Michael asked. Elise pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. James, she called softly when the waiter passed by. Could you discreetly find out that gentleman's name for me? And perhaps where he works? James nodded. I believe he mentioned to the hostess that he's celebrating his daughter's birthday. He's one of the janitors at Massachusetts General Hospital. I'll see what else I can learn. As their own dinner finally arrived, Michael found himself less interested in his perfectly prepared steak and more fascinated by the joy unfolding at the other table. The father and daughter were savoring each bite, laughing together, creating a memory that would last forever. You know, Michael said thoughtfully, I've never seen you like this before. Like what? Elise asked. I don't know. Real. Human. He winced at his own words. That came out wrong. But Elise smiled. I understand what you mean. When you're in my position, Michael, people see the wealth, the power, the achievements. They don't see the scared little girl who once watched her mother count pennies to buy groceries. By the time dessert arrived, an elaborate chocolate creation with a candle for the birthday girl, Elise had made several calls and sent numerous texts. Michael watched his mother with new eyes, recognizing a purposefulness he'd seen in board meetings but never directed toward an individual. "His name is David Reyes," James informed them quietly as he refilled their water glasses. "His daughter is Sophia. He's worked at the hospital for 6 years, night shift mostly. His wife passed away from cancer 2 years ago." Elise nodded, her expression softening further. "Thank you, James." As David and Sophia prepared to leave, the little girl radiant with happiness and the father looking lighter than when they'd arrived, Elise made a decision. "Wait here," she told Michael, standing up. "Mom, you said anonymous," Michael reminded her, suddenly protective of the moment they'd created. "Some things need a human touch," Elise replied. Michael watched as his mother approached the table. He couldn't hear what she said, but he saw David Reyes's expression change from surprise to confusion to cautious hope. Sophia looked up at Elise with wide eyes, especially when Elise knelt down to speak to her at eye level. After a few minutes, Elise handed David a business card, shook his hand, and returned to their table. "What did you do?" Michael asked. "I offered him a job," Elise said simply. "In our facilities management department. Better hours, twice the salary, full benefits. And I told him about our educational foundation that could help Sophia with a scholarship to the science camp she apparently dreams of attending." Michael stared at his mother. "Just like that? You don't even know him." "I know enough," Elise replied. "I know he's working night shifts as a janitor while raising a daughter alone. I know he spent what little extra money he had to give her a birthday dinner. And I know talent and dedication when I see it." As David and Sophia left the restaurant, the little girl turned and waved at Elise, her face glowing with excitement. David nodded, a mixture of gratitude and dignity in his expression. "Now," Elise said, turning back to Michael. "Let's talk about you." Michael expected the lecture to resume, but instead, his mother asked, "What do you want to do with your life, Michael? Not what you think I want you to do, or what the Harrington name suggests you should do. What drives you?" The question caught him off guard. No one had asked him that before, not his teachers, not his friends, and certainly not his mother, who had always spoken of his future at Harrington Technologies as a foregone conclusion. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never really thought about it." "That's the problem," Elise said gently. "You have every opportunity in the world, but no purpose to direct them toward. Without purpose, privilege becomes a burden, or worse, an excuse for self-destruction." Michael thought about the look on Sophia's face when she realized she could order anything on the menu. About the dignity in David's posture despite his circumstances. About his mother as a 7-year-old girl, watching her own mother sacrifice. "How did you find your purpose?" he asked. Elise smiled. "It found me. When I was 19, Mom got sick. The medical bills were astronomical. I dropped out of college to work full-time, but it wasn't enough. That's when I created my first software program, a simple inventory management system I sold to local businesses. It wasn't revolutionary, but it worked, and it paid the bills." Michael had heard the sanitized version of this story before, how his mother had founded Harrington Technologies from her dorm room, a classic rags-to-riches tale. But he'd never heard the raw truth behind it, the desperation, the necessity, the love driving her innovation. One program became 2, then 5, then a company, Elise continued. But the purpose was always clear, to take care of Mom, to build something that would ensure neither of us would ever count pennies again. "And now?" Michael asked. "Mom's gone. You've built an empire. What drives you now?" Elise looked thoughtful. "For a while, it was just momentum. Success breeding more success. But lately..." She glanced toward the door where David and Sophia had exited. "I've been thinking about legacy. Not just what I leave to you, but what I leave through you. Through all the lives I can touch." As they finished their meal, something shifted between mother and son. The lecture about Michael's suspension never materialized. Instead, they talked, really talked, about possibilities, about finding his passion, about seeing the world beyond the bubble of privilege he'd always known. 3 months later, Elise stood in the doorway of Harrington Technology's newly established community center in one of Boston's underserved neighborhoods. The center offered after-school programs, technology training, and support services for families struggling to make ends meet. And leading a coding class for middle schoolers was Michael, his face animated as he explained basic programming concepts to a group of eager students, including Sophia Reyes. David, now the facilities director for all of Harrington's Boston properties, stood beside Elise. "He's good with them," David observed. "Has a natural way of making complicated things simple." "Yes," Elise agreed, watching her son with pride. "He's finding his purpose." After his suspension, Michael had surprised everyone by volunteering at Massachusetts General Hospital, the same place where David had worked as a janitor. 3 times a week, Michael would read to children in the pediatric ward, many from families struggling with both illness and financial hardship. It was there that he discovered his interest in teaching, in using his knowledge to open doors for others. "Sophia talks about him all the time," David said. "Says she's going to be a software engineer like Ms. Harrington someday." Elise smiled. "She has the aptitude for it. Her test scores are remarkable." "Thanks to the tutoring program you set up," David acknowledged. "I never could have given her these opportunities on my own." "Sometimes we all need someone to see us," Elise said. "To really see us, and what we could become with just a little help." As the class ended, Michael spotted his mother and waved her over to meet his students. The teenagers gathered around Elise, peppering her with questions about technology, business, and her journey. She answered each one thoughtfully, seeing in their eager faces the same hunger for opportunity that had driven her own success. Later that evening, as Elise and Michael drove home, he asked, "Do you ever think about that night at Lucille? How different things might be if we'd gone somewhere else for dinner?" Elise considered this. "I believe some encounters are meant to happen, Michael. That night changed David and Sophia's lives, yes. But it changed us too." Michael nodded. "I was such a brat." "You were lost," Elise corrected gently. "Now you're found." As they pulled into the driveway of their Beacon Hill home, Michael said, "I've been thinking about college again. Maybe business and education as a double major. I want to expand what we're doing at the community center, take it nationwide." Elise felt a surge of pride unlike anything she'd experienced in her business career. "The Harrington Foundation for Educational Access," she mused. "Has a nice ring to it. And I want to start with a scholarship program for single parents," Michael added. "People like David, like Grandma was. People who just need someone to see them." As they entered their home, a world away from the struggles of David Reyes or the young Elise and her mother, Michael paused in the grand foyer. "You know what's weird? I have everything I could ever want, but I've never been happier than when I'm teaching those kids at the center." "That's not weird at all," Elise said, hugging her son. "That's purpose. And purpose is worth more than billions." 1 year later, the Harrington Foundation had established community centers in 5 cities, with plans for 20 more. David Reyes had been promoted to oversee all community initiatives, bringing his first-hand experience of struggle and resilience to shape programs that truly served families in need. Sophia had won a national science competition with a project on accessible medical technology, inspired by her mother's battle with